the last meeting of the Scrutiny Performance Panel for Education this year. So welcome. And have we, could I say, welcome to Mike Hayes, who from Eston, who sometimes, I'm told, listens into our meeting. So welcome to see you in person, and obviously to the team from Education, Helen, Sarah, Kate, and of course Robert. Yeah, so we got any apologies?
Yes, we've got apologies from James McGettrick, Sue Jones and Beverly Hopkins.
Great, thank you. Are there any disclosures? If there are, Michelle will send out a template. Any hands up? No. There we are. Okay, thank you for that. The minutes, the prohibition of votes. This is a standard agenda item, and I think we all know the answer to that. Then number 4, minutes of the previous meeting. Any questions on the minutes, or can we take them as a correct record? Yeah. Okay, can't see any hands up, so thank you for that. Public question time. There are no public questions, so we're straight down to number 6. I think the next bit of the meeting might take longer, but that's great. So the first one is annual education performance against identified priorities, and could I call on Councillor Robert Smith, the Cabinet Member, and then I believe it's Helen and Sarah. So Robert.
Thank you, Chair. And I won't say much as a means of introduction, just to thank Sarah for preparing this report, because I think there's a lot of information in here. So what I'd suggest is that Sarah takes us through the report, and then we can have a discussion on the key themes afterwards. Over to you, Helen, in the meantime.
Thank you, Cabinet Member. Just to touch upon the forward, it's a joint forward by myself and the Cabinet Member, Councillor Smith. Just want to draw attention to a few highlights. I'm particularly proud to be a director in Swansea because of the evidence of delivery against our service objectives has been strong in the last academic year. So that effective delivery can only be achieved with our stakeholders, our schools, their staff, and obviously the learners themselves. So we do not work in a vacuum. We see moreover that we are actually engaging and consulting with our stakeholders in order to deliver services that suit them currently. I'm particularly proud, as is the Cabinet Member, of some of our achievements through other committees within the Council, such as the Service Transformation Committee for Education Skills, in terms of policy development. Last year saw the development of the Behaviour Policy for Schools, a model policy for schools, and a local authority behaviour policy. Very proud that that's been implemented and is being embedded currently across all schools in Swansea. Equally, during the last academic year, we undertook a significant reset and redesign of our specialist teaching facilities under the guise of our ALN transformation strategy. And that has resulted in more places, more specialist settings in Swansea, and that implementation has happened as a result of the planning from the 1st of September this academic year. Also proud of the fact that we've reached the stage of entering into governance with our new special school, Ysgol Calon Lan, which has come into existence as a result of the planning that happened last academic year. One of the other things that we have been working diligently on during the last academic year is consideration of one of our core statutory functions in terms of evaluating and monitoring our schools precisely. And we are very pleased as well, as a result of the planning that we've undertaken throughout the last academic year, to have produced a new school improvement framework. And that has resulted in better early identification of schools that need the most support proportionate, really, in terms of how we support them, both in terms of professional learning, advice and guidance on leadership, and other support where required. Also proud, you will have heard a scrutiny panellists in the last scrutiny meeting in November about our designing destination strategy. Pleased to report that the Swansea pledge, as part of that, will be launched in January. So we are happy to report that all the work that we've done last academic year has resulted in 100 businesses signing up to the Swansea pledge. And that is very much something we are proud of, because we are delivering on the careers and work-related education statutory requirement within curriculum for Wales very well, in my opinion, in Swansea. Last academic year also saw a significant piece of work leading to a rationalised regional school improvement service, but we are proud to partner with partneriaeth to ensure that there's delivery, especially for our secondary schools, of support for professional learning across core subject areas, and indeed support to deliver a pipeline of strong leaders in our Swansea schools. Also, one of the Service Transformation Committee's commitments to developing principles to support learning was developed last academic year. And again, those principles are being embedded across our schools, and the focus on teaching and learning has become profound, not just through that framework of principles, but also through our school improvement framework as well. We are very proud that we've maintained a golden thread from our corporate plan where education skills are concerned, where we have a bridging document called Abertawe 2028. So our vision in Swansea for education services is an excellent education for all. Our mission is Abertawe 2028. It's a 5-year plan. And this academic year, we will be evaluating that thoroughly. So we know that we've delivered against it, but the key for us is examining how well we've delivered it and how our stakeholders, our customers, the schools, who are our clients essentially, how it's landed with them. So that's a significant piece of work that's ongoing and will be delivered during this academic year. Really interesting as well to note finally that obviously we have HMI, Mike Hayes, as an observer with us this afternoon in this meeting, and we are very cognizant of the Estyn recommendations that were left with us back in 2022, 3 years ago, and also the inspection outcomes of our schools, which we do report on in the main part of this report. So we still are working on recommendations, and some of them will be continual, especially when we look at some of the provision around the WESP, which is a 10-year plan, which we also heard about in a recent scrutiny meeting. So very proud just to highlight those elements of the forward, but I will turn to my colleague Sarah, who's been compiling this report diligently for the panel. So over to you, Sarah. Diolch.
Thank you, Helen. Sarah.
Thank you. Yeah, really pleased to be able to present this report on behalf of the Cabinet Member and the Director for the 3rd year. And during those 3 years, since 2022, this report has had 2 parts to it. So the first part of the report is our progress against the Estyn inspection recommendations following the inspection of local government education services in 2022. So I'll start with that section, and then the second section then is around progress against our corporate objectives. So starting with the first recommendation, which was to review post-16 provision to ensure that it meets the needs of all learners. So the 3-year post-16 strategy, the strategy progress itself has come to the panel on a few occasions, but that strategy has now been completed. And the common thread throughout the strategy was to strengthen partnerships, joint strength and planning through that partnership approaches, and ensure that stakeholder involvement throughout that planning and partnership approach, which did also include the survey of learners, post-16 learners around their choices. So the brag rating, I haven't highlighted that yet. So where that's coloured in blue, that is consistent with our corporate performance RAG rating, which blue means complete. Green means that it's on track, amber there's a delay, and then red there's a significant delay. So throughout this post-16 strategy, you can see that it is blue, which means all of those work streams have now been completed, and those work streams have provided a solid foundation for the designing destination strategy. Again, that draft strategy went to this panel last month, so you have had that overview, which will take us forward. So I believe that that will be published in early 2026. So I'll quickly move on because there's a number of pages. The second one was to strengthen Welsh medium provision across all ages and areas of the local authority. So we have delivered a third year of delivery against our Welsh and Education Strategic Plan, which is the WESP. And since December last year, we've had a dedicated WESP officer to focus on this delivery of this plan and strengthen those partnership approaches. Again, our WESP officer came to this scrutiny panel last month, and I believe that she gave a comprehensive overview of what the work that's been taking place, but I can give some highlights of some additional progress since then. So in terms of the targets set out in the plan, the number and percentage of learners entering Welsh medium education has remained a challenge over those past few years, and we've monitored those trends closely. There's been some strong work to identify the awareness of Welsh medium education across the county, and early indications suggest that there has been increased interest in this current admissions round, but I'm unable to confirm those numbers until that admissions round is concluded and those offers have been made. But there are positive movements in terms of the interest in Welsh medium education. And similarly, in that preschool provision, so the Cylch Maithrin, new settings were opened in the county in the last academic year, and the early data for that we've been provided shows a significant increase in the number of children accessing that provision, which we hope will then take the decision to move on into statutory education. There has been an improved provision offer for learners with additional learning needs, and a new specialist teaching facility opened in September, and Kate's inclusion item is next, so we'll have more detail on that. Just moving on, in terms of immersion provision, so our primary provision has continued to benefit those primary learners, but what was introduced in the last academic year was that secondary provision to provide some intensive language support for those older Welsh medium learners. And there has been positive movement in terms of the numbers of learners transferring from primary Welsh medium education to secondary Welsh medium education. That has been particularly challenging since the pandemic, but we have noted improvement in this last academic year as a result of some of that transition work. So I'll just pause there. That's the progress against the recommendations.
Any questions, anyone? I don't see any hands up. What I would say is obviously it's good news about the work around careers that we taught, having given that oversight. That's really important because I think in this panel we see dedication as a journey and into work, and that therefore is good. You talked about the things we are on track on. What are we not on track on? What do we need to improve? Because whenever we're doing well, there's always something that we need to do and put a greater emphasis. Is there something that you could highlight?
Yeah. So in relation to the WESP, when we report corporately in terms of performance, you will see that there are WESP outcomes that are falling below target. So we're keeping a very close eye on some of those outcomes in relation to children arriving in our schools. So where we see the numbers of reception aged children, for example, that's one example that we may be below target on. We are trying to intervene and market more, raise awareness in order for that to happen. So the early indications, as Sarah indicated, is that the current admissions round is indicating that we will get an incline in terms of that performance, and that's what we're looking at ideally.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, if I could come in on that specific point, I think the last scrutiny session, I think it came out that this was a Wales-wide trend, and that was what was happening in Swansea was being reflected all over Wales, or you can see the other way, what was happening in Wales is being reflected in Swansea. So it'll be interesting to see whether this is what we're seeing in Swansea, and we're hoping we will see it in Swansea, is something that's confined to Swansea, or is that again an all Wales trend when those figures come out? And I think, you know, we'll be able to learn then, are we doing the right thing on what we need to do to move forward.
Fine, thank you. Councillor Mike, and then followed by, I'm sorry, it's Adam first.
I think
then
Adam
Mike.
was first. Yeah.
Adam first, then
Yep.
Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Apologies if this is at the wrong point and you were going to come on to it. I had a question about exclusions. Firstly, just want to thank the officers for the detailed report. From the data in the report, we can see that exclusions are dropping, and this coincides with the introduction of the opening of the behavioural unit. I just wanted to know how much of the drop are we attributing to the opening of the behaviour unit, and if there's anything specific about the work of the unit that you'd like to go into, highlight why that might be driving exclusions, or if it's just sort of the norm returning after the pandemic, because obviously we saw a spike in exclusions around the pandemic, or if it's a bit of both. I'd be interested to know. Thank you.
Great. So,
Councillor Davis, thank you for the question. I think Kate will probably cover a little bit more of it in the detailed report on education other than at school and additional learning needs. But in relation to behaviour, we don't specifically have a behaviour unit. Obviously, our pupil referral unit largely deals with children whose behaviour needs greater regulation than others. And obviously that facility has been there for a number of years in its current format, with 158 learners who can attend that facility. It's very difficult to attribute one factor that is the silver bullet that makes a difference to exclusions. What I would say is that we obviously have a refreshed behaviour policy, which is a contributor and an enabler to help support schools. But I think ultimately, when it comes to, for example, the reduction in permanent exclusions in our secondary schools, it is very much about the whole staff understanding the cohorts they've got in front of them. The students that attend our secondary schools very often come from damaged, chaotic backgrounds, and they really need a great degree of empathy and respect. They are our little human beings, they are precious cargo, and I think it's the whole school understanding of that child. So I think the relational approaches that have been adopted through our behaviour policy as it stands currently are very much adding towards creating increased inclusion and reduced exclusion. It's really hard to put a finger on one factor though, but I think more detail will follow in the subsequent report. Thank you.
is that okay, Adam? Yeah, great. Excellent.
Yeah, if I could just perhaps come in, because I think Adam raises an important point here. And one of the things we did was to take a step back and look at the data that was coming back from schools, rather and focus on what does this tell us in the round. And I'm not going to name any schools when I come in to say this, but we were looking at patterns, why the exclusions were high in certain schools, perhaps not in others. What were the factors driving that? Was it a reaction to a specific set of events? Was it related to implementation of whole school policies? And I think there were actions there at school level and at local authority level that needed to be taken. And I think that they have been taken. It's working with schools, because at the end of the day, that's what we've got to do if we're going to implement anything successfully. And it was working with heads, for instance, on making sure that whole school approaches were genuinely adopted as whole school, and that all staff were working to the same expectations, the same standards, and so on. And I think that has paid dividends, and we're seeing changes in the figures. So I think, yes, we've got to look at the Swansea-wide data, but let's look at individual school data as well, and that tells a very, very interesting story. And I think that's one of the strengths, which is why we've come to where we are now.
Right, fine, thank you. Mike.
Yeah, first of all, before I come on to a question, I think as everyone on the committee would agree, it's great to be able to see the progress that has been made and is being made. If you stand back from the significant changes and pressures that schools and education have been under over the last few years, you know, starting with COVID and the impact that has on absenteeism and then coping with the introduction of the new curriculum and new inspection frameworks and so on, examinations. There's an awful lot that's going on, isn't there? And I think, you know, in the introduction, the overview that Robert and Helen gave, one of the key elements of that which came through was the importance of collaboration between schools and the centre, and the introduction of the school improvement service, which has been a great help, I understand. I noticed that one of the amber areas is the collaboration between schools, as it were, and I wondered if at this stage, I know that the work stream will be further built upon in the next academic year. Is there any indication at the moment as to how that might be happening? Are there any kind of issues in terms of the collaboration between schools? And the second question I've got is that whilst there is significant progress in coping with the changes that have taken place, one of the impact of the changes is upon staff. And I wondered if there are any challenges that come through as a result of the pressures that staff have been experiencing in terms of difficulty of retention and recruitment of staff. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks,
Helen.
Chair, and thanks, Councillor Dave, for the two parts of the question. Obviously, Sarah is going to give us an overview of the second part of the appendix in question, but I'm happy to answer those questions now, if that's appropriate. So turning to the issue of collaboration, I think it would be remiss of us to say that our schools aren't collaborating. What is probably at the amber stage is our oversight as a local authority of the strength and depth of collaboration across Swansea schools. So we know it's happening, but being able to collate and collect that and effectively disseminate deep and meaningful collaborations between schools, that's the bit that we need to do better on. And our aspiration is to get to blue, to have that complete oversight. And we do have a set of policy objectives that have come from Welsh Government. That means that we are still working on those objectives to ensure that we are as mature as we can be as a local authority in understanding where the best practice around true collaboration that actually makes a difference to learner outcomes. That's the bit we really, there's a lot of collaboration going on, but whether it makes a difference to learner outcomes, that's the bit we really need to get sharp on. So that's a work in progress, Mike. And I think turning to your second question, which was, if you remind me, Mike, it was about
the pressures and the response
Thank
of staff
you.
in terms of whether there's any issues in retention and recruitment.
We're not seeing particular issues in Swansea. We keep a workforce census, so we are examining the data carefully and understanding from key stakeholder engagement where the issues lie. When it comes to the recruitment of leaders in our schools, we're in a healthy position. We're not seeing generally a reduction in number of staff leaving the profession. We do have recruitment issues in key areas such as science and maths in secondary as examples, and then chronically we have a depletion in the workforce in terms of Welsh medium secondary and specialist subjects, for example. I think what we are more attuned to as a local authority and particularly proud of is that listening piece in terms of our stakeholders, understanding the pressures, the different changes and the sum of all parts. When those changes are added together, it does create pressure in the system. So what we've established is our Reducing the Burden group, which is a group that meets regularly to understand, particularly when it comes to school leadership, but not exclusively about school leadership, leadership, what are the pressures, what are the pinch points that are irksome, that cause administrative burden and potentially can be delivered better in a different way, in a more streamlined, digital, savvy way. So I think that listening piece is something that enables us as a local authority to prevent people leaving the profession, but also the prevention measures around staff well-being in our schools. We do regularly advocate education support, which is promoted and endorsed by Welsh Government, and that affords counselling services 24/7 to staff in schools. That's a free service. And recently, since July, and for our schools in Swansea, the new employee scheme to support employees across the council and in our schools ensures that there's a further access to counselling services if required, but also advice and guidance is readily available around the well-being. So I think we have to ensure that we keep the staff in Swansea. We've got some really excellent staff working across our schools, and we have to be really alert to the factors that may cause them to leave the profession. Ultimately, as school improvement, that service is trying not to put pressure on our staff. We have moved away from perception of things like the authority conducting mini inspections, as an example. Not that we did anyway, but there was a lot of perception that that was happening and that staff were under pressure. We also work closely with our trade unions. So the Councillor Smith, as Cabinet Member, myself, routinely attend our forum for education trade unions. And that's where we hear from the ground up, really, what staff are experiencing, both from a teaching, non-teaching and leadership perspective. So our ears are firmly on the ground when it comes to understanding the matters that affect recruitment and retention in Swansea. So we're very much catering to local needs.
Thank you. Is it possible to come back just with a couple of points, if I may?
Certainly, yes. Mike.
Yeah, thanks. I think the two significant points for me would be, well, I suppose the first one is maybe a little bit flippant in that, you know, presumably looking at AI, there may be ways in which that can be harnessed for reducing some of the pressures in future, and maybe, Chair, in future we'd be able to come back on the Scrutiny work programme and look at AI and the impact of AI in delivering education. But the second point, which is relating to that of the shortage areas, I guess that we're not alone as a local authority in that, and that's those shortage areas are something which are experienced by other local authorities. I just wondered if there's been an opportunity for you, Helen, through ADU, and Robert through the Education Cabinet members' meetings to ask Welsh Government what actions they are able to take in terms of addressing those shortage areas.
Yes, there is regular dialogue across Wales with directors of education across Wales, and we do touch upon these shortage areas and the use of collaboration in terms of digital methods to combine courses online, particularly in the secondary sector. That's something that is evolving and growing. But obviously there is a workforce plan, so Welsh Government are very keen to understand how we can preserve our workforce and indeed build capacity, particularly in the Welsh medium sector, as is required to deliver the Welsh in education strategies of every local authority. So these conversations are happening, but pleased to say that there is a workforce plan for staff in schools that is being implemented from a Welsh government perspective, but that it's been fed into from an ADU perspective. So that's one element. And secondly, I would welcome an opportunity to look at the opportunities and challenges afforded by AI. But indeed, as officers, we know how it can be a time-saving device, but also it's a double-edged sword. But indeed, our schools are being supported in appropriate use of AI currently. And we have a digital officer working in education who would be happy to come and talk to the panellists here about challenges and opportunities.
Thank you.
But thank you very much for that. Sarah, back to you.
Thank you. Yes, the next section is around the progress against our objectives. So these are the progress in terms of delivery against the work streams outlined in the report. It's not an evaluation. However, we have tried in the cameos to identify impact wherever that can be demonstrated. So I just wanted to make note to the panel to note those cameos throughout the report. The first section is the inclusion strategy, and I'm going to skim past that section of the report because it is the next agenda item this evening, so Kate will be able to cover that in significant detail. And the next section is Welsh language skills, which I have covered under the first section of the report also. So we next move on to school leadership, and in terms of supporting and maintaining effective leadership, including governance across schools, that training and support for school leaders at local and regional level continues with formal learning opportunities, local support, and the assignment of leadership coach to each new and acting head teacher to provide that support continues. The school improvement team has increased their capacity, specifically in the secondary phase, to support schools, and impact logs have been implemented to identify and share good practice. Internal quality assurance processes for school visit reports has resulted in more evaluative reporting, supporting a clear view of improvements required. The school improvement team and the governor support unit have developed their partnership working approaches this year to support those operational matters swiftly and effectively. So volunteer governing bodies were sought to work on a project to consider a cluster approach, but there wasn't interest in terms of expressions of interest. So following some school visits to follow up on that, some schools have shown interest, and that will be followed up in the next academic year. So we'll report on that in the next report. In terms of mapping, developing collaboration parameters, we've covered that just now, so I'll go past that. And that cameo driving improvement through Swansea's No School Improvement Framework, again, has also been highlighted previously. In terms of teaching and learning, school support visits this academic year had a strong focus around the quality of teaching and learning, with reports of most schools having appropriate improvement plans in place and the quality of teaching and learning is good. Professional learning is shaped by school-based requirements, and targeted sessions have been delivered by the school improvement team. And the school improvement team developed policy principles to promote learning. And again, that stakeholder feedback and partnership development, so including the University of Wales, Trinity St David's, and the Education and Skills Service Transformation Committee. And that principles-based policy was completed this year. Literacy and numeracy professional learning strategy has been developed to support settings across Swansea, and they have again presented to this panel this year. And the implementation of the digital strategy for education has continued to progress strongly. And again, Helen has just mentioned their work to, they can also focus on fast-paced area of AI, because that is continuously developing. So the next section is around the development of a design and destination strategy. So that's currently green at the end of the academic year, but that will move in blue. So, at the
I think there's some feedback from someone's got the mic on.
Sorry, I think it's mine. Yeah. Sorry, I'll go back to the point. Sorry. So that should be RAG rated blue early in 2026. Yeah. So the next section is around environments. So the next milestone there is around capital delivery in accordance with the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme. So that work to improve the school estates continues. It's again a long-standing programme. Progress against projects in 24-25 academic year. include the project commencement of the new school build for Bishop Vaughan, with pre-construction phase in progress, the part new builds to provide additional Welsh medium secondary school places in Ysgol Bryn Tower, statutory proposal to amalgamate the Ysgol Creg Glas and Pen y Bryn has now been completed, with Ysgol Calon Lan Special School established on those existing school sites, and Gowerton School part new builds suitability in pre-construction phase. The delivery of the final capital universal free school meal projects continues, with 5 major capital schemes awaiting completion, but there are interim measures in place to ensure that those meals are fully delivered to those schools through temporary measures. And also completed during that academic year was the publication of a new accessibility strategy, and that went to Cabinet earlier in the year. So I'll just note there, again, a cameo for the Penrail Primary Specialist Teaching Facility. So we move on to delivery of catering and cleaning services. So that review of the service delivery model is underway. The Service Transformation Committee has food in schools on their work programme this year, with that first report submitted in July. So that work is ongoing. And the delivery of universal free school meals programme in terms of the delivery is complete. Next section is around digital transformations. There's a digital transformation programme across the Directorate. The first section was the new management information system for the Directorate to simplify processes to support additional learning needs, and that was to support both Directorate additional learning needs staff and ALNCOs in schools with a simpler system and reduce workload. That was implemented earlier this year, and digitalisation of our school mid-year transfers admissions process, which has been completed, and that's fully running now, and it's just gone live, so completed for the admissions round for the first time. We also delivered a new schools management information system, and again that was to aim to reduce the administrative burden in schools around their previous system. And the update there is, as of next Monday, all schools will be fully transferred across to the new system. So we hope that from the spring term, we'll fully start to realise the benefit of that across our schools. And we are also progressing digital transformation for catering and cleaning. So again, it's about making sure that those systems support the operational requirements of that service. And that action plan is delivery and underway at this point. And again, a cameo there is around the new information system. So I'll just pause there before I move on to the data summary.
Great, thank you. Any questions at all? Not at the moment. We'll wait for you to finish.
Thank you. So the next section is our data summary. So I just want to make just a highlight around the Key Stage 4 results. This is the first year that learners sat their Key Stage 4 examinations without any form of specialist arrangements, so should not be directly compared with previous years. I have noted in the report that the 2025 data is provisional until publication, but there's no significant differences to the provisional data in the report. Okay, so just note those figures there. Is there anything you want me to raise or highlight in that report?
Any questions, anyone? Any points? No, only thing what I would ask, I know the Service Transformation Committee are looking at school catering. What percentage, can you remind me, of food is produced locally?
I think we'd have to take that question back, Chair, and find that out and
That's okay.
Bring it back to the panel.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, and that's not a problem. Okay, any questions from anyone? Adam.
Apologies, my computer wouldn't mute that. On the previous item agenda, I referred to it as the behavioural unit, and I appreciate that that's not the name of it, so I just wanted to apologise for the clarification, for the use of poor terminology on that one. I wanted to ask with regards to the unit, are we tracking returns back into mainstream education with that, or is there a timeline that we would typically see for people to return to mainstream education, or have I asked them the wrong agenda item again? I am sorry.
Kate.
Yeah, thank you. I will cover it a bit in the next agenda item, but you're right. I think it's the pupil referral unit that you're referring to, and increasing reintegration to mainstream has been a major part of our strategy in terms of the remodelling of the operating model in that provision. So yes, we do absolutely track return to mainstream, and that's a key indicator for us really on success. And we've actually moved to quite a different model now, where there are more opportunities for learners to have part-time places in the PRU, which is supplemented by their place in school. So it's a full-time offer, but the part-time provision means that they're able to retain their position in mainstream more effectively.
Any, do you want to follow that up, Adam, or you okay?
I just want to apologise for asking the questions out of turn. Sorry.
Don't worry. Any other questions, anyone? Can't see any hands up. No. So thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, for that, thorough report, and thanks for the work that's gone into it. The next item. Sorry. Oh, right. I beg your pardon. Sorry. Yeah, you've just got. You want to continue? Yeah. One last item.
Thank you. Yeah, just wanted to draw attention again to the final page of the report, which is the Eston inspection of schools. There's links to each of the inspection reports, but our directorate also circulates these to you all throughout the year. In terms of the schools under categories, so in the 2024-25 academic year, one school remains under an Eston review category. And of the inspections that took place during this academic year, 2 were placed into significant improvement statutory category and 1 into a special measures statutory category. 2 schools were removed from Eston review, and those were Grossyth and Loganfach. So I just wanted to make note of those at the end of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to Sarah? No hands up. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, yeah, for the report. And the next item on the agenda is the inclusion strategy and progress update. And Robert and Helen, then Kate.
Yeah, again, Chair, and I think we've got a solid story to tell when it comes to what Helen and Kate are going to present this evening. There are changes not only to my stero, but to the way we address ALN across Swansea. I think that there are strong. There's a strong story to tell. Again, I think if Kate and Helen take us through the report, and then we'll come back at the end and have a full discussion, Chair.
Great, thank you, Helen.
Thanks, Chair. I think in terms of pride in the team, in terms of achieving real good outcomes, in terms of keeping children in school, I'm particularly proud of 3 things. One is that we've been able to increase attendance rates year upon year in nearly all our schools. So we've got the right direction going, but there is more work to be done in terms of attendance. And we recognise that the primary sector is particularly an area for us to focus on this academic year, because we are not keeping up with the national rate of improvement. So before COVID, you would have seen Swansea being above the average for Wales. We're now below average for primary attendance, and indeed the gap is widening between the national rate of improvement and Swansea's. So that's a key area of focus for us. But I'm proud of the overall direction of attendance improving both in primary and secondary schools. Secondly, then, in terms of exclusions, the rate of permanent exclusions in secondary schools coming down significantly is noteworthy. and that can only be achieved in collaboration. So our teams, in terms of learner engagement teams in particular, their work with schools to ensure that we try our utmost to avoid exclusions is absolutely an achievement in itself. That collaboration piece is absolutely key, because we know there is no good outcome from any type of exclusion ultimately for a learner, but that significant success achieved there is noteworthy. And thirdly, I think I am proud, and Kate will come to it in her report specifically, it's around the never giving up on a child piece. I think when learners come from such damaged backgrounds and chaotic lifestyles, I think that ethos of never giving up is important. What we have in our officers in the learner engagement team is that ethos of never giving up and finding all types of creative solutions to ensure that children continue to be educated in Swansea, no matter how difficult the challenge. And I'm very proud of that. So Kate will take you through the highlights of her report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I certainly have got some examples of that I've been told about and have, actually raised with your department, with yourself even, and with really good outcomes, I have to say. So I've got sort of living proof in that actually happening. Kate.
Thank you. Thanks. So the report outlines the progress against our inclusion strategy. So it's a vulnerable learners service inclusion strategy that really outlines our 5 priorities that we're working on between 23 and 28. But this report will tell you what we've done in the last 12 months. So it's really around our commitment to prevention and early intervention. They're the kind of pillars of our strategy. And so we're going to highlight some successes and also improvements in outcomes for vulnerable learners. So the strategy has got 5 priority areas. One is promoting attendance, really important, promoting inclusion, and in that's really around reducing exclusions, embedding effective universal provision while supporting sufficient specialist places. That's about the provision that we have in place for our learners with additional learning needs. So how we provide that graduated response from a universal offer right through to a very highly specialist offer. Embedding a shared inclusion ethos, and that I guess links to that approach around never giving up and making sure that every child is at the centre of any decision and planning. And then our whole school approach to emotional health and psychological well-being, which is a kind of element, it's a priority in itself, but it also weaves its way through everything that we do, because in order for children to succeed, they really need to be emotionally safe and well. So if I just talk through the 5 priorities, if that's okay, and the progress. So promoting attendance is the first one. So improving attendance is a significant priority and will continue to be so. And our approach is around supportive interventions rather than punitive approaches. The past year, the Education Welfare Service, who are the key team in the Vulnerable Learners Service who work in relation to attendance, underwent a full review and restructure to ensure that we can work more proactively with schools and families and support that preventative approach. So it includes training our officers in trauma-informed practices and supporting emotionally based school avoidance, which is a key issue in terms of attendance for learners. So every school now has a tailored attendance action plan. There's support via our family engagement officers, and they meet regularly with families. They share strategies to improve attendance. Our education welfare officers also attend those meetings. And we're really about emphasising family-centred solutions, particularly in relation to persistent absenteeism. It's about addressing the causes rather than putting a punitive action in place as a result of children not attending. So we're looking at what's actually creating the challenge and finding solutions for that. So the efforts are showing results. Attendance is still below pre-pandemic levels, and Helen's rightly said there's still much to do, but it is increasing steadily. Secondary school attendance improved from 88.5% in 23-24 to 89.7% in the last academic year, and then primary school attendance has improved to 92%. Our pupil referral unit has improved significantly, with attendance currently at 70.8% at the time of writing the report, and that's 13% higher than the same period the previous year. And we really attribute that to the changes that we've made as part of the remodelling of the operating model there. So that's really around a much more bespoke learner-centred experience. It includes outreach, personalised timetables, flexible reintegration packages, and in some cases we've got learners who've previously been unable to attend school due to anxiety who are now achieving over 90% attendance in the PRU. So that's something that we want to learn from and to replicate wherever possible. Our Education Welfare Service also held a big conversation event, so about listening to families, understanding barriers to attendance and using that feedback to develop our strategies. So it's a positive trend through intervention, early intervention and prevention, but trauma-informed approach is absolutely critical, but still more to do. So the second priority is around promoting inclusion and reducing exclusion. So hopefully provide a bit more detail around some of the questions that have already been asked. So over the past year, there's been a really focused, collaborative and innovative programme of change in order to address concerns around challenging behaviour. It's work that's built upon our previous prevention and early intervention strategies in relation to promoting inclusion, so taking a positive learner-centred approach, and the success is evidenced in an overall reduction in exclusions. So schools are supported to only use exclusion as a last resort, and the learner engagement team particularly focus on this work, and they provide regular training, briefing sessions to head teachers and governors on strategies and supporting alternatives to exclusions, and that can be is in part highlighting the importance of early intervention. We've also produced new guidance on our pastoral support plans to make sure that it's really clear for schools in terms of a framework to allow alternative options prior to considering an exclusion, and that will include multi-agency input. I've talked about the remodelling of the PRU, Maesteru, and our EOTAS panel processes, and where previously pupils were often permanently excluded and then referred to the PRU full-time, we've got a much more flexible and preventative offer in place now, and the Cameo details some of the impact of that. The EOTAS multi-agency panel has, as part of that review, has been given much greater flexibility in terms of what they can offer, and they focus on recommendations that are bespoke and retain time in school, so that connection and that sense of belonging continues. They include early help and absolutely a focus on reintegration. And so that's really helped provide alternatives to permanent exclusions, and we've seen a increase in our reintegration rates to schools. So, as I say, a positive impact on exclusions. The data's in Sarah's report. This data that I've included was at the time of writing the report, but the PRU has seen fixed term exclusions drop by 55% in autumn 24 compared to autumn 23, which suggests that new model is successful really in managing behaviour without exclusion. We're looking really carefully at the use of reduced timetables across Swansea schools, and that was right. It was really important to develop that piece of work on PSP processes so that we can support learners and detailed strategies to support. I think it's also probably important to note as well, because we've reported to Scrutiny previously about worries around incidents of violence and aggression in the PRU, and the work undertaken has significantly reduced those incidents. So during the autumn term, incidents of violence and aggression at the PRU were 59% lower than in the previous year. So that's a really significant change that kind of reflects the impact of the work. More pupils are remaining connections with their mainstream schools, so the reintegration focus means that we've got a 9.8 increase from the previous year on the number of learners who successfully reintegrated, and I think that's really going to develop further with the new model. So one example is a year 9 student who'd been at risk of permanent exclusion in 24. He was given a part-time PRU placement for 1 term with a focus on promoting positive relationships and literacy support, because they were identified as being the key barriers. So the pupil attended his secondary school for the remainder of the time, and by summer 25 he'd returned to mainstream where he's thriving and there are no further incidents reporting, and that's the kind of model that we want to have in place for all of our learners. We've got emotional literacy support assistance in place to help children regulate their emotions, and these strategies and approaches support Swansea schools to foster more inclusive cultures. So the third priority is really around our pupils for additional learning needs. So that's embedding effective universal provision while supporting sufficient specialist places. So we want to strengthen the mainstream offer, and that's really critical and in line with principles of the Additional Learning Needs and Education Inclusion Tribunal Act. But we also know that we need to expand specialist capacity where it's needed. So we've done had a number of really significant developments in relation to this priority. So there was an extensive 4-year review and co-design with stakeholders in relation to our SDF, specialist teaching facilities. So that was quite a long piece of work that we managed to proceed to public consultation in autumn 24. And we had a really extensive consultation period then because it's quite a significant programme of change. And we were able then to proceed to a statutory notice without any objections. And Cabinet approved the new SDF model in March 25. So that's facilitated the opening of 5 new SDFs and the expansion or redesignation of others. There's been a small number of closures, but they've resulted in us being able to redistribute the places. So the net effect is an increase of 61 additional places across Swansea, but importantly, providing a consistent local offer for children wherever they live in Swansea. So that was a kind of underpinning principle of that, as was extending the Welsh medium offer. So the proposals really strengthened the Welsh medium specialist teaching facility offer, and we had our first primary Welsh medium SDF open this year. So in parallel to that work, so the specialist places are really important, but as are developing capacity in mainstream. So we've also piloted a cluster enhanced provision model, and that's detailed in one of the cameos as well. And that provision is called Brimbach, which operates out of Town Hill Primary School, but serves the Dylan Thomas cluster of schools. And children with emerging ALN needs have been identified for short-term intensive support on a 2-term basis. And the learners get specialist support at the base, but really critically, the base also visits the home schools to provide specialist advice and guidance. And similarly, the principle here is that we're putting support in place early to allow children to remain within mainstream and within their home schools. So that's been really successful, and 78% of the pupils attending that provision have successfully reintegrated to their mainstream schools with improved engagement and progression identified by their assessments. We've had some really positive parental feedback. And seen some really kind of qualitative outcomes in terms of children's confidence and concentration, which is really positive. So we're considering options now to scale the project up across Swansea. Similarly, we had a Welsh medium cluster pilot, but that's actually now developed into a full-time specialist teaching facility. But running the pilot prior to that allowed us to support staff to train. We heard about some of the challenges in recruiting Welsh medium staff, and that allowed us to support them to develop that specialism that was needed in relation to additional learning needs. We developed outreach approaches with our special school, which has been really beneficial, and that will continue with the newly amalgamated Calon Lan Special School. There's a cameo in Sarah's report around our work with the occupational therapy teams that we've commissioned, and that's been hugely positive in terms of looking at environment and looking at how we can change the way that we operate and deliver in provision to support children and young people and to meet the kind of changing motor difficulties and sensory needs that are emerging more and more in our schools. So we've had some really positive feedback from that. So really the approach is around strengthening both mainstream and increasing specialist places to get the right balance of provision. And what's been positive about that is that we've got a really strong record now in demonstrating that's effective via our outcomes at Education Tribunal. We are having less tribunals lodged, which is positive, but where they are lodged, we are very successful in defending them. So only 1 out of 25 appeals was upheld. The remainder were resolved in favour of the local authority's plan, which really kind of evidences that our local offer is strong and one that people have confidence in. We've used our ALN Capital Grant in a very targeted manner to support this programme of change, and there's a cameo in relation to one of the specialist teaching facilities, the new teaching facilities. It's really important to align that grant to the strategy to make sure that we could take forward the physical spaces as well as having the provision in place. And there's an accessibility strategy as well, which has allowed some physical upgrade, which is really important. So, you know, the capacity to support learners with ALN, both in mainstream and in specialist settings, has really been strengthened. But it is set against a national picture of increasing need. So we need to continue that innovation, really. We can't stop. We have to keep on making those changes and strengthening that capacity. Then I guess part of what underpins all of this work is our inclusion ethos. So it's really important that we achieve a shared inclusion ethos to make sure that we have that culture shift that's necessary to ensure that every child and young person is given their very best opportunities. So that work is really focused on developing common values, policies and language around inclusion. And central to that was the work on the new behaviour policy, which was co-designed with schools and written via a multi-agency stakeholder process. It was really extensive engagement and the output was a truly co-designed respect, rights and responsibility policy, which emphasises relational practice, consistency and pupil voice. And that policy and accompanying toolkit of resources were launched at a conference. It was very well attended with most schools represented, and former Swansea learners came and spoke about their own experiences to really share, you know, the kind of impact and approaches that would work for them. So, and we also included learners in developing the policy, and we did a feedback loop to make sure they understood how their work had impacted. So we've produced an exemplar policy for schools that mirrors the local authority policy, and schools have also been offered a place on a relational change programme when the adults change, which is now, since writing the report, be rebranded as Navigate, and every school has access to that. We've done some myth-busting work, which has been nationally recognised, and that's in relation to a needs-led approach in relation to autism or ADHD. And that's been publicised widely. And then professional collaboration networks are also in place. That was something that came out of our stakeholder engagement. Pastoral leads wanted a network, and so that's been established. And then finally, the work that we do on emotional health and psychological well-being is really embedded across all of those strategies. But just to kind of highlight some of the specific actions, what we're really looking to recognise is that allowing learners to feel emotionally safe is really important. It's critical to progression and inclusion. So we've strengthened those approaches. One important development was the recommissioning of our school-based counselling service. And our new provider is really aligned to our new way of working. So that's been a really positive development. So they offer, for example, outreach and engagement with families in a more flexible and holistic model. They've undertaken Year 6 transition wellbeing programmes, and 900 Year 6 pupils across Swansea were given support to focus on managing how to move into secondary school. So kind of emphasising that prevention approach to getting ahead of what potential challenges might look like for children. Our educational psychology service kind of leads on a lot of this work and continues to deliver training on emotionally based school avoidance and our emotional literacy support assistance. So one of our comprehensive schools had noted that pupils who received this support saw an increase in attendance, and that was improving to up to 78% of cases. Work is overseen by our Emotional Health and Psychological Wellbeing Forum, and that aligns to the Welsh Government framework. So and we've now got a direct link into CAMS for our PIU pupils, which has been really positive development. So in conclusion, I think I just really want to outline that I think there's been quite significant progress in relation to our strategy. There are systemic changes and they're beginning to generate measurable improvements in key areas. The focus is absolutely on prevention and early intervention, and it's about creating outcomes for learners, which in turn supports their engagement and progression in learning opportunities. So I think it's important to note that embedding the changes and sustaining progress will be a focus. It's not something that we can do overnight or a one time only. We need to make sure that we build on it and keep the kind of persistent focus and the constant updating and renewing of all of this activity is really important to keep it live in people's minds. I think it's also really important to know that there's going to be continuous challenges. So we've talked about attendance still not having reached our pre-pandemic levels. The increase in the complexity of additional learning needs is something that we need to, keep responding to. So we've got some dependency on grant funding, which brings concerns around sustainability, and some of our initiatives, some of the things that we've highlighted that have been really effective are really dependent on grant funding. So there's a tension there really in terms of how we sustain that and keep that resilience. But
Fine, thank you very much, Kate. Robert said he'd like to come
Yes,
in,
Chair.
and then we'll take some questions.
You may have noticed when I introduced the item, I stopped myself mid-flow, and I did that on purpose because I thought I need to give Kate the floor here because I think she's taken you through all of the work that's being done. We know that that there is more demand in the system. The needs of children and young people are increasing, and that's causing a question. Then, calling into question, how does the system respond? And I think what we've heard from Kate this afternoon, there has been innovative thinking in Swansea. There's a range of different strategies have been used to address the capacity issues and try and address the needs of our children and young people. And I think it's about harnessing the capacity of our system in Swansea and looking at that system and how can that system work differently to meet the rising needs. Now, that's not saying that we don't need extra resources. Of course we do. I think that's a given. But it's how we can work differently, how we can meet those needs, because we're not alone in this. Every cabinet member I speak to across Wales and indeed across Britain is raising the same issues, the same challenges, wherever you are, in terms of things like additional learning needs, attendance, behaviour, all of those issues. And I think what we are doing here in Swansea is responding as best we can to increasingly serious issues across all schools. And I really commend the work that Kate is and her team are undertaking. To be honest with you, Kate, listening to that, I'm out of breath. And no, but I do pay tribute to the work that you and the team have been undertaking.
Great, thank you, Robert. Any questions to Kate? Any hands up? Sandra.
Hi. Yeah, as you say, you can see the work that's going in there. I'm looking at the exclusion data. Fixed term exclusions 41.5 per thousand currently, and it's on its way down, but pre-COVID was 21.5 per thousand. Do you think you'll get back to that? Is that what's in this, is that the goal?
yes, so the goal would be to go even lower than that. I mean, that's the ideal. Any exclusion is an exclusion too many. That's always been our approach, really. And so, but it is very difficult. There are increasing needs, increasing challenges. But what we're really seeking is an alternative approach to that. So when we talk about the emotional health and psychological well-being, that trauma-informed approach, the understanding of how children can feel emotionally safe and how we can embed relational practices to support a different approach to managing behaviours that are challenging is really critical. So that's what we're aiming for. Absolutely.
Is that fine?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, just
Thank-
I'll bring Helen in. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And just to supplement the answer, Councillor Joy, I think the Cabinet Member referred to our data analysis where exclusions are concerned. It is profound and deep, you know, our analysis. And what we know, for example, in terms of fixed term exclusions in the primary sector, they have increased. That's true to say in the last academic year. But our forensic analysis of data means that we are able to attribute those exclusions to mainly 3 primary schools. So that enables us to work in a targeted manner with those 3 schools to ensure that we are, you know, putting our resources in the right place as well. So I think that analysis of data is serving us well, really, to understand where the issues are and what we can do differently as a result.
Thank you. That is helpful. Yeah.
Right. Fiona.
Yeah, thanks to Kate and Helen and everybody involved, because it's a huge amount of work preparing the report, but it only reflects all the work that you've been doing ongoing and continue to do. I just wanted to ask about, in terms of priority 2, reducing exclusions, you referred to reduced timetables and the fact that you're now sort of encouraging using the pastoral support plans to formalise that agreement to have less than a full-time timetable in schools. I just wondered, firstly, do you use the Welsh Government template? Have you adapted the Welsh Government template for PSPs? And also, how do you sort of monitor the use of these? How long they might go on for? Are they reviewed regularly enough? And is there work that schools put into increasing attendance and building up attendance, not just keeping them on PSPs for extended periods of time? Because I know, you know, EBSA is a huge issue, isn't it, as well as other additional needs.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, we've just updated our guidance to schools in terms of PSPs and reduced timetables. The key principle for us is that a PSP shouldn't ordinarily be a reduction in a timetable. We would always argue that a PSP should be evidencing additional provision that's put in place to support a child to retain a full-time offer. It may be that what that looks like is something additional to what would normally happen in terms of their education, but we would avoid wherever possible any reduction in timetable. Where there has to be a reduction in a timetable, that should always be for the minimal time limited period, and that would include a regular review with every part of the PSP focusing on increasing attendance. So we have officers from the learner engagement team who monitor PSPs, so that the ask is that schools submit PSPs and work with the learner engagement team to develop them jointly, so that we can look at how we can make those offers as full-time as possible. So yeah, absolutely, it's about increasing the time in mainstream, but ideally not reducing it in the first place.
Oh, great. Thank you. Interesting.
Great. Any other questions? Sandra.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm just going back to the behaviour policy that you've worked on. You say you produced an exemplar policy and that the uptake has been positive. Do you have any data on how many schools have taken it up, how they're working with each other then? Obviously more descriptive there. And I know it's early days, but yes, a certain amount of success, even if it is, again, case study or anecdotal.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of how many have adopted the policy, we don't know that yet. What we anticipate is that with the way the governing body cycles work, they'll have been doing that through this term. So hopefully when they look at governing body minutes, they'll be able to see how many have taken up the policy. But what we do know is that we've got 53 of our schools currently have signed up for the relational change programme. So that gives us quite a good indication in terms of how many have engaged with When the Adults Change, which is the programme that we've commissioned. And we're also working quite closely with our school improvement team to make sure that that offer is part of discussions with schools, that they're aware that that offer is available to them and that they're supported to sign up. So and I think it's a pretty good rate of acceptance in that at the moment.
Okay. Do you want to go back? Do you want to go back? Great. Any other questions? Yes, Helen.
Oh, thanks, Joe. I
I've
just
got
wanted to
a few as well.
supplement the answer to the Councillor Joy's question from Kate. I think when we set out a course of change in terms of that behaviour policy piece, what we tried not to do was impose anything on our schools, because we already knew that many of our schools had really robust policies that they'd adopted, developed, and they had a clear plan and approach. I think what we wanted to do was enable schools to consider model policy in order to tweak existing policies, or indeed a wholesale adoption. There was that choice and flexibility, and I think that served us well as well. I think if we impose something on all schools, it wouldn't have worked as well. So we needed to consider that.
And I think that's the difficulty, is trying to work out where the impact is. I mean, there's clearly something in that the exclusions are on a bucking the trend, in the sense that they are dipping compared with Wales. But it's, as you said, it's attributes in it to a sequence, a series, a group of change, but it's knowing where. And that's why I wondered how many had adopted this policy and were going down that route at this stage.
I think what's important for us is that because we developed a local authority policy, that will enable us to review it. So that will trigger continued kind of re-engagement with extensive kind of co-production piece, and to go back maybe in a year, 2 years' time to ask the questions, well, what difference did that make? And I think we need that time to embed first, but then to discover really where the difference is and the impact is. But I think it's too early to tell really, given that the implementation has spanned maybe a couple of terms, in 2 terms, a couple of terms. In reality, I think we probably need 6 academic terms for us to be able to review the impact and review the effects. Yeah.
You also mentioned that there were 3 particular schools. Have they been encouraged to work on these lines in order to sort of improve their situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of our approach when we see higher levels of exclusion, or indeed any exclusion, is to sit down and work with the schools and look at their kind of policies, their strategies, their approaches. We've got this relational change programme that's fully funded for schools. We want to be very much about, it's about getting that investment from schools in terms of those approaches and strategies, rather than making it something that feels quite punitive or something that we're doing to them. So that's absolutely the approach, is working in partnership with the schools, put a little bit of challenge in place, but mainly it's around kind of saying, we're a bit worried about this, but here are all the tools, strategies and support that we can put in place to help you to kind of make that change and bring that shift in culture. So, and it is about often kind of, giving confidence with the alternative strategies and approaches, because it is a bit of a shift in terms of way of thinking and ways of managing situations. Really very pleased about the way that the work in Maestera in the PRU is developing, because the intention would be that will be able to support through kind of outreach and through an example of actually how it can work. And that gives that kind of like, that's a really challenging environment to work in, and if they can do it, then we think we can really kind of evidence that it's effective, it's supportive, and this is how we can help to make a difference. That makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Next question, Beth.
Hi, it's lovely to see all the progress in this area as well, in both the reports presented today. I was just going to ask, with the ALN pilot, if there's been sort of training for parents about supporting youngsters who are maybe going through diagnosis or have had diagnosis. I just wondered if that was part of the pilots.
Yes, so we've got a couple of pilots running, but there is something that does do exactly that. So with the myth busting project is intended to support schools and families, very much around families in terms of what they can do when they're waiting for diagnosis, what a diagnosis might mean for them. There's a whole raft of activity that's available. So we've got a lot of signposting, but there's also, we've done it in partnership with, it's happened through the regional partnership board, and we've done it in partnership with Nice Port Talbot. So we've got talks. There's like talks that families can access online, little podcasts that they can listen to that will explain about, you know, what support's available to them. There's information on the website. We've got a little cartoon that runs. We've had adverts in the bus station and so on, so that it's very well publicised for families to be able to connect with that myth busting work and understand the needs-led approach and what support is available to them, irrespective of whether the diagnosis is in place. If the child's needs are presenting as such that they need some support, then this project helps them to know where to find it.
Okay, Beth. Yes. Right. Any other questions? Could I just come in with one? What are the biggest risks to delivering this strategy, as in funding, staffing, you know, the pressures? Because a lot of really good work that is going on, but obviously that brings its own pressure in, as I say, funding, staffing, demand, even growth.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So I think it's the tension between the increasing demand and the dependency on grant funding. So there's a risk in terms of sustainability, because a lot of our work, there will never be enough money. There never is for anything, is there? But because we're dependent on grant, there's an anxiety, I guess, that we can't really embed that sustainability. So some of the pilots that we want to scale up, we're going to be dependent on some grant funding for that. And we know that alongside that, everything we're doing is really making a difference, but we're not going from a standstill position, because there's a nationally recognised increasing need in terms of learner profiles, complexity and number. So it's that tension between demand and resource.
Fine, thank you. I think, you know, obviously when you're putting that together, your plans together, you can't really forward plan confidently without the knowledge of that funding as well, I suspect. Helen.
Yeah, I guess, Chair, the other risk is not communicating what we do well enough with our stakeholders. We do a lot of communication, but we realise we have to re-communicate and continually communicate some of our messages, principles. We're currently undertaking, or potentially going to undertake, a review of our principles to support ALN in schools. And I guess as there is staff turnover in our schools, what we developed 3 years ago might not even be known to a few staff. So we need to revisit where we need to communicate our policies and strategies continually. And that's a piece of work in itself, isn't it? On top of the innovation, the actual delivery, it's actually making sure the people delivering on the ground know what the tools are to help them as well. So that's a risk if we don't communicate well enough. We could get our messages lost somehow.
Any other questions? If not, could I thank you know, Sarah and Kate for 2 excellent reports this afternoon. There've been lots of questions around them as well, but thank you very much, because they didn't, and it's not just writing the report, all the work that's gone into you know, where you're displaying what's actually going on the ground, and that's important. So thank you all very much. Right, and the next item on the agenda is the work plan. And has anybody got any comments about the work plan? No. There we are. If that's the case, our next meeting is going to be on the 22nd of January. So in the meantime, could I wish you all a very Merry Christmas, and dare I say at that point, Happy New Year as well. And thank you for the work that you've done this year. And we look forward to seeing you all next year. But have a good Christmas. Thank you.
Nadolig lawen.
Thank you.